I never imagined that the woman I'd been married to for 22 years would be capable of betraying me. It's funny how you don't see the cracks in the foundation until something big happens, something undeniable. For me, that moment came one evening when Lauren came home wearing a dress I didn't recognize. A bright red dress. Too short, too tight. She'd never worn anything like it before. But it wasn't just the dress. It was the other things. The strong scent of another man's cologne, lingering in the air. The kind that's not subtle, the kind you notice as soon as she walks through the door. I stood at the top of the stairs, frozen, watching her remove her shoes. Her eyes immediately darted down to her wrist, where she quickly tugged at the thin bracelet that gleamed in the light. She hid it under her sleeve before I could get a good look at it. When I asked her about it, she offered an explanation that felt rehearsed. It's just a gift from a colleague. A symbol of friendship. Really? She said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. I was at a farewell party. Someone spilled perfume on me. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in the back of my mind screamed that this wasn't right. The bracelet, the perfume, the late nights. It all felt off. And the way she kept wiping her phone screen, making sure I didn't see what was on it, added fuel to the fire. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. For the first time in our marriage, I felt like something was wrong. Something was broken, hidden behind a shiny surface. The next morning, Lauren woke up, kissed me goodbye like any other day, and left for work. But I wasn't just another day. The way she kissed me felt distant, like she was marking a routine rather than showing any real affection. I noticed the smallest details, the slight hesitation in her steps as she walked out the door, her quick glance at the mirror before leaving. She'd never been like that before, not in the last 22 years. And it bugged me. It bugged me enough that I couldn't focus at work. As I sat at my desk, I kept thinking about that damn bracelet. The way she hid it, as if it were something I wasn't supposed to see. Why would she hide a simple piece of jewelry if it was so innocent? And the perfume, that wasn't just a light mist. That was the unmistakable smell of a man's cologne. A strong one. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe I was just tired. But deep down, I knew better. Lauren and I had always been a solid couple. At least I thought we were. Over the years, we'd built a life together. We'd survived financial struggles, dealt with the stress of raising kids, and weathered our fair share of personal challenges. But there had always been a sense of stability. We had a routine, a rhythm that felt like it couldn't be broken. We were a team, but suddenly this crack appeared. It was like a tiny, imperceptible fracture in the glass, and the more I stared at it, the bigger it got. The more I let my mind wander, the more pieces of our life didn't make sense. Lauren had always been open about everything. We shared details of our day, our thoughts, our little triumphs and struggles. But lately, she had become more distant. She'd spent more time out with her colleagues, working late, taking trips on weekends that never seemed to add up. There were always excuses. I'm just tired. I need a break, she'd say. It's just work, Justin. I'm doing this for us. But the more she said it, the less I believed it. And then there were the little things. The subtle changes that seemed harmless but, in hindsight, added up. The way she spent more time at the gym, getting dressed up more for outings that seemed innocent but were never quite as casual as they should have been. She started taking phone calls in the other room, leaving the room when I entered, always with her phone turned face down. That red dress, the perfume, the bracelet, it wasn't just about those things. It was about all the things I'd dismissed over the past year. The things I thought were trivial but, in reality, were signs of something much bigger. Something I didn't want to face. After Lauren left for work that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to find out more. I wasn't the type of guy to snoop through my wife's things, but the need to understand what was happening inside our marriage had become overwhelming. I found myself standing in the kitchen, staring at her phone, the one she left on the counter before rushing out. The rational part of me knew I shouldn't look. I shouldn't invade her privacy. But the other part of me, the part that couldn't ignore the feeling in my gut, told me to check. So I did. I picked up her phone, unlocked it with the code she never bothered to change, and went straight to her messages. Nothing immediately stood out, but then I saw a name I hadn't seen before. It was a contact saved under a first name only, Graham. My heart skipped a beat. The text messages were casual at first. A lot of back and forth about work, plans for after-hours drinks, and some chatter about her day. But there was something more in the tone of their conversation, something that felt off. The jokes, the teasing, it felt more like flirtation than friendship. It wasn't anything explicit. Nothing that would make me scream in fury. But it felt wrong. And the more I scrolled, the more I saw. There were late-night texts, pictures of food they'd shared at dinners, and inside jokes that only they understood. No mention of me. No mention of her family. Just them. It was like I didn't exist in that world anymore. I felt the blood rush to my face, my hands shaking as I put the phone down. I could hear the thudding of my heartbeat in my ears. For the first time in years, I felt like I was losing control of everything. I didn't want to confront her right away. I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to think. To gather my thoughts. But the truth had already settled in my chest like a stone. This wasn't some small issue. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was betrayal. That night, I waited for Lauren to come home, my mind running through 1,000 scenarios. What was I supposed to say? How could I confront her without losing myself in the process? The woman I loved, the woman I had trusted without question, had been lying to me. She had been hiding things from me. And I couldn't ignore it anymore. When Lauren finally came home, I could see the tension in her face. She could sense something was off, but I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Not yet. I was too numb. Too confused. So I just nodded at her and muttered, "How was your day?" She looked at me, hesitated, and then smiled, that same tight, rehearsed smile. "It was fine," she said, her eyes darting to the phone on the counter. "I'm just tired. Long day at work." I nodded again, watching her carefully, trying to read the unspoken words in her body language. But she was good at hiding things. She always had been. And in that moment, I realized how much I had overlooked. How much I had let slip by. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth right then and there. But I couldn't. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us, suffocating, until she excused herself to get ready for bed. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to make sense of it. Trying to figure out how to fix this. How to confront her. And somewhere deep inside, I knew it wasn't going to be as simple as just asking her what was going on. There was more at play here than just a few late nights and some innocent text messages. No. This was a betrayal. A deep one. And it was going to change everything. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had found. It wasn't just the texts, the secretive phone calls, or the way Lauren seemed to avoid me whenever I asked direct questions. It was everything. All the little moments I had dismissed as nothing more than passing inconveniences now seemed so much more significant. It was like someone had taken the veil off my eyes, revealing all the signs I had missed. All the signs I had ignored. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Lauren had been changing for months, maybe even longer. At first, it was subtle, a change in the way she spoke to me, a shift in how she interacted with our friends. But then it escalated. She stopped spending as much time at home. We used to cook dinners together, just the two of us, laughing, talking about our days. It was our time. But over the past year, those nights had become few and far between. Instead, she'd often dine with colleagues. I didn't think much of it at first. She had a good group of people she worked with, and I knew she was trying to climb the ladder at the firm. But when those dinners turned into late meetings and team events, I started to feel uneasy. She didn't talk much about her work anymore, and when I asked about her day, she'd give me short, vague answers. It was like she was living in two separate worlds, one with me and the other, it seemed, with someone else. Then there were the weekends. Lauren used to spend them at home with me, relaxing after a long week at work. But for the past several months, she'd been tired, as she put it, and would disappear to go to the spa or meet a friend. Each time, she'd come back late, her story never quite adding up. She'd claim she'd spent hours at the spa, but she'd never have any receipts, never a schedule to show for it. When I pressed her, she'd simply brush me off. That was when I started to notice the little things. The way she would avert her gaze when I asked her direct questions. Her nervous laughter, her quick glances at her phone whenever I came into the room. It felt like she was hiding something, and it made my stomach twist every time. It wasn't just the texts anymore, it was everything. The way she moved, the way she looked at me, the way she seemed to be pulling away. I could feel her slipping through my fingers, and I couldn't stop it. And then there was that one trip she took. She told me she was flying to Atlanta for a work conference. She seemed excited about it, talking about the itinerary and how she'd be meeting with important clients. But when I checked her GPS history on our synced tablet, the one we used to share for convenience, I saw something strange. It didn't show Atlanta. It showed her on the South Carolina coast. When I confronted her about it, she shrugged it off, saying it was just a geolocation error. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust her. But the more I looked back on it, the more that excuse seemed flimsy. The cracks in our marriage were growing wider. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that she had been deleting her phone calls. I couldn't figure out why at first, but it hit me one day when I glanced at her call log. She had been erasing numbers, even the ones I recognized. She had no explanation, no reason for it, except for a vague, "It was just an accident, Justin." I used to trust her implicitly. We had built a life together, a home, a family. But now everything felt like a lie. I couldn't stop looking for answers. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was obsession. I was piecing together a puzzle that didn't make sense, and every time I found a new piece, the picture it painted was more painful than the last. One night, after she came home late from another work dinner, I decided to follow her. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I needed to stop overthinking things. But deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to know. I had to see it for myself. I followed her car through the city, keeping a safe distance. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but the need to know the truth was overwhelming. After about 20 minutes, we ended up downtown. She parked outside a bar I didn't recognize, and I watched as she got out and met up with Graham, the same man from the texts. They stood on the sidewalk, talking and laughing like old friends. But it wasn't just friendly banter. There was something about the way they leaned in close, the way they touched each other, that made my blood run cold. They looked like a couple. No words, no mask. Just two people who were completely comfortable in each other's presence. My stomach churned. I couldn't watch it anymore. I turned and left before they could see me, but inside everything collapsed. The illusion was gone. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had trusted, was not the person I thought she was. I drove home in a daze, feeling like I was in a fog. The entire night felt surreal. The world around me seemed distorted, like it wasn't real. I barely even registered how I got home. All I could think about was what I had just witnessed. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to wake up from this nightmare. But I knew it wasn't a nightmare. This was my reality now. When I got back, I sat in the living room, staring at nothing. I didn't want to confront her right away. I couldn't. I needed time to process. To think. But the questions kept coming, one after the other. Why had she been so careful to hide her phone? Why had she started lying about where she was? Why had she changed so much in the past year? The woman I married, the woman I thought I knew, was slipping away. And I didn't know how to stop it. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the image of them standing together, laughing, touching, like they didn't have a care in the world. I knew the answers I was looking for were right in front of me, but I didn't want to face them. The pain of it was too much. I wasn't ready to lose everything, to lose her. But the truth was undeniable. Lauren wasn't just drifting away. She was already gone. And it was only a matter of time before I had to face the consequences of it. The next few days were a blur of anxiety, fear, and disbelief. Every part of me screamed that I needed to confront Lauren, to demand answers, to get the truth. But I wasn't ready yet. I couldn't be. My mind was spinning in circles, trying to process the gravity of what had happened. I couldn't just act on impulse. This needed to be handled carefully. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. I started tracking Lauren's movements more closely. Every detail, every shift in routine. I knew she'd be heading out again. She'd told me that she was going to a friend's bachelorette party, a detail she was almost too eager to share, as though she wanted to make sure I knew where she was going. I didn't say anything when she mentioned it, but something about the way she said it made me uneasy. She didn't mention Graham, but I had a feeling he'd be there. The night she was supposed to be gone, I did something I never thought I'd do. I decided to follow her. I wasn't proud of it. It wasn't the kind of man I had ever been. But at that point, I wasn't thinking clearly. My need for answers was consuming me. I needed to know if I was right, if everything I had been piecing together was true. I used the car's GPS, which I had synced with the house system a long time ago, to track her. It felt like I was invading her privacy, but in that moment I couldn't care less. I just needed to know. Lauren left the house around 8 p.m., dressed to the nines in that tight red dress again, the same one from the night she came home late, reeking of someone else's cologne. She wasn't alone. She met Graham outside, and I saw them exchange a hug that lasted a little too long. It wasn't just a friendly hug either. They held each other close, and for a moment I felt the world around me shatter. I could see it now. The lie had been right in front of me all along, but I was too afraid to acknowledge it. My wife wasn't just seeing someone on the side. She was in a full-blown relationship. And from the way they acted, it wasn't a secret. They were a couple. No hiding, no pretending. Just two people standing there in plain sight, comfortable with each other in a way that made me sick to my stomach. I watched them walk into a rooftop bar downtown, the kind of place Lauren and I never went to. It wasn't the type of venue I ever imagined her being at. I'd seen the way she acted when she was around Graham before. She'd been different. There had been an energy about her, a spark that she had never shown with me in recent months. Now I knew why. It wasn't just the dress or the perfume. It was the way she looked at him. Like he was the one she had been waiting for and I was just an afterthought. I stayed back, hidden in the shadows, watching as the door to the bar swung open. The music inside blared and the laughter of the crowd spilled out into the street. My heart pounded in my chest as I saw them walk in together, arm in arm. Graham leaned in and kissed her on the cheek as they entered. The sight of them together, so at ease, so comfortable, made everything feel like a cruel joke. For a brief moment, I wished I could just disappear. I wanted to erase the image from my mind, to unsee it, but I couldn't. It was burned into my brain like an image that wouldn't fade no matter how hard I tried to push it away. I stayed for another half hour, though every part of me wanted to leave. I wanted to get out of there, to escape from the reality I was now living in. But I couldn't. I had to know more. I needed proof. So I watched them from the corner of the bar, staying in the shadows. I couldn't look away. Lauren was laughing, smiling, touching his arm in a way that I hadn't seen her do with me in months. Maybe longer. And Graham? He was looking at her with that same gaze, the kind of look that said everything without saying a word. It was the look of a man who had already claimed her. The worst part? I couldn't even be angry at him. I had known this man for months, but I hadn't seen what was happening right in front of me. He had been the one feeding her attention, the one who made her feel wanted when I didn't even know she was missing something. The whole situation felt suffocating, like a heavy weight had settled over my chest, making it hard to breathe. I left before they saw me. I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want to confront them in the way I knew I wanted to. There was no reason to embarrass myself further. The truth was already clear. My marriage was over. I drove home in silence, the car almost eerily quiet as I let everything sink in. What was I supposed to do now? How could I fix this? Could I fix this? I wasn't sure. But one thing was certain, I had been living a lie. And the worst part was that I had been blind to it. For so long, I had trusted Lauren, believed in the vows we made. But now I knew it was all a facade. The woman I had thought I knew, the woman I had spent 22 years of my life with, was someone else entirely. When I got home, I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just walked through the door, the weight of the night pressing down on me. I barely registered the sound of the door clicking shut behind me. I went straight to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of water, and sat at the table. I needed to think. I needed to process. Lauren came home about an hour later, looking a little too happy, a little too carefree. She kissed me on the cheek like it was any other night, but I knew she wasn't fooling me anymore. I wasn't the naive man she had married. I had seen her for what she truly was. And now I was done pretending. She must have seen the change in my demeanor, because she immediately asked, "Is something wrong, Justin?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The words were lodged in my throat and I wasn't ready to say them yet. But I wasn't going to stay quiet forever. I couldn't. Not when the truth was so clear. That night, I barely slept. I kept seeing their faces, their laughter, their touches. It was like I was stuck in a loop, replaying the worst moments of my life over and over again. And I couldn't escape. The next few days felt like a bad dream. I couldn't shake the images of Lauren and Graham together, their in asterisk mate whispers, the way they touched each other so freely. But I had to do more than just replay the moment in my head over and over. I needed to know the full extent of what was going on to understand the depth of her betrayal. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Lauren's infidelity wasn't just emotional, it was financial as well. I had always trusted her with our finances. We'd built everything together, from our house to our savings to the kids' college funds. But now it seemed like that trust had been misplaced. What if the lies extended beyond her affair? What if there was more at play, something bigger than just a personal betrayal? I couldn't ignore the possibility that she might be manipulating everything to her advantage, setting up a new life, a life without me. I had to dig deeper. I had to go through everything. So I started with the bank accounts. At first, it was just a routine check to see if there were any unexplained withdrawals. But as I opened the documents, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The more I scrolled through, the more it became clear that something was seriously wrong. $15,000 had been withdrawn a month ago. The label for the transaction was corporate training expenses. I frowned at the screen. Corporate training expenses? Lauren had never mentioned anything about that. I knew her work, I knew her schedule, and I knew that she hadn't gone anywhere for any training. And $15,000? That was a lot of money. A lot more than I would expect for any kind of professional development. I immediately pulled up her account activity and started searching for more inconsistencies. It didn't take long to find another red flag. A second mortgage had been taken out in the last 6 months. The loan was signed with my name, my signature forged. I sat back in my chair, stunned. I had never signed any mortgage documents. I knew the process. Lauren and I always discussed big financial decisions together, even ones that seemed relatively small. So how was this possible? How had she managed to get away with this without me noticing? I quickly called a lawyer I had used a few years ago for some routine paperwork. After explaining the situation, the lawyer confirmed that the mortgage was a forgery. The bank's paperwork had been altered and somehow they had made it look like I had signed the documents. I felt a sickening pit in my stomach. I wasn't just dealing with betrayal, I was dealing with something far worse. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about Lauren attempting to take everything I had built. But there was more. I had known Lauren to be ambitious, but this was on a whole different level. I started digging through other financial documents, credit card statements, investment accounts, even the tax filings. The more I went through, the more I found. Hidden assets, unexplained transfers, and accounts that I had no idea existed. It was clear now Lauren wasn't just cheating on me. She was systematically building an exit strategy using our marriage, our home, our finances as collateral. That's when I started to connect the dots. The affair with Graham wasn't just an emotional escape, it was part of something bigger. I had seen the way she had been praising him at work, the way she had talked about his work ethic and how brilliant he was. I had dismissed it at first, thinking it was just a passing admiration. But now I saw it for what it was, part of a calculated plan. Graham wasn't just a lover, he was a partner in her scheme. Together, they were setting me up to lose everything. I had to act fast. I couldn't just let this go on any longer. I needed to confront Lauren, but I couldn't do it without more information. I needed to know exactly what I was up against. So, I contacted an old friend, a federal consultant I had met years ago when I worked with a private investigator on a case involving fraudulent investments. His name was Tom, and he worked on financial crime cases for the government. I wasn't sure how much help he could provide, but I knew he'd be able to point me in the right direction. After I filled him in on the details of my situation, he didn't hesitate. "You're not crazy, Justin. I've seen cases like this before. It's a scheme. She's not acting alone. There are others involved." Tom didn't waste any time. He started digging into the background of Graham and Lauren's activities, searching for connections, anything that could help confirm what I suspected. It didn't take long for him to get back to me with a chilling discovery: Graham had a criminal past. It wasn't something that was widely known, and in fact, the case had been buried years ago. But Tom had access to some government databases that allowed him to track down old records. Graham had been fired from a real estate firm years ago after being involved in shady dealings. There were accusations of money laundering, fraudulent property deals, and exploitation of small businesses. The case had been dismissed, but the damage had been done. Graham's reputation had been tarnished, and it was only a matter of time before it came back to haunt him. But the more troubling discovery was Lauren's involvement in his past. There were documents that linked her to some of the same businesses that Graham had been involved in. It wasn't enough to make a direct connection, but it was enough to make me suspect that Lauren wasn't just cheating on me for emotional fulfillment. She was using him for something much darker. I wasn't about to sit around and wait for things to escalate further. I had to take action. So, I contacted a lawyer, someone who specialized in financial fraud and divorce cases. She was sharp, efficient, and understanding. After I explained everything, the forged mortgage, the hidden accounts, and my suspicion about Lauren's role in the scheme, she didn't hesitate. "We need to move fast. You can't let her get away with this. I'll help you gather the evidence you need." I didn't know where this would all lead, but I knew one thing for sure: Lauren had underestimated me. She thought she could hide her tracks, that I wouldn't figure out what was going on. But now I had the proof. I had the documents. I had the connection to Graham's past. And I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything I had worked for, everything we had built together. The stakes were higher than I had ever imagined, but I was ready to face them. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity. This wasn't just about saving my marriage anymore. This was about protecting myself, my future, and the life I had worked so hard to build. Lauren wasn't going to get away with this. And I would do whatever it took to make sure she paid for what she had done. The more I delved into Lauren's web of lies, the more I realized I was in over my head. This wasn't just a simple case of infidelity, this was something much darker, something that could take everything from me. The evidence I had gathered so far was enough to confirm my suspicions. Lauren was not only cheating on me, but she was also involved in a large-scale financial conspiracy. Graham wasn't just her lover, he was part of a criminal operation, and Lauren was the key player. It felt like I was in the middle of a chess game, but I wasn't sure who my opponents were. Were Lauren and Graham the only players, or were there others involved? Who else knew about this? Who else had a stake in our downfall? Every step I took to uncover the truth seemed to lead to more questions, more threats, and more potential dangers. As I sat at my desk, surrounded by piles of paperwork, financial records, bank statements, loan documents, and the incriminating evidence from the private investigator, I began to realize that I couldn't take this on alone. This wasn't just about a divorce anymore. This was about a massive criminal scheme that could ruin my life and possibly others' lives, too. Lauren had clearly been planning something that involved more than just the money and the affairs. She had been building an escape plan, and in doing so, she had dragged me into it. I needed to take the next step. I needed help. But it wasn't just any help. I needed someone who could handle the scope of what was happening, someone who could unravel the conspiracy Lauren and Graham had set in motion. And that's when I decided to reach out to someone I had never imagined I'd need to contact, the FBI. Tom, my federal consultant friend, had already given me valuable insights, but even he had his limits. He knew people in high places, but this case was so complex and deep that it needed more than just a few connections in government circles. It needed a full-scale investigation. I reached out to Tom, and he didn't hesitate. He put me in touch with an FBI agent who specialized in financial crimes, Agent Michelle Carter. Tom had spoken highly of her, and when I finally met her, I could see why. She was calm, composed, and laser-focused. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She immediately took control of the situation. We met at a small cafe downtown, a place where we wouldn't attract attention. She didn't make small talk, she got straight to the point. "Justin," she said, leaning in as she scanned the room, "I've seen cases like this before, but this is different. What you've uncovered could be a much larger operation than you realize. You've done well so far, but we need to go deeper. We need to get more intel on Lauren, Graham, and anyone else involved." I nodded, my mind racing. I had gathered enough evidence to support my case, but I knew it wasn't enough. I needed to know the full extent of the conspiracy, who else was involved, how far it reached, and what their endgame was. The more I learned, the more dangerous this situation became. Agent Carter looked at me with a steady gaze. "We're going to need everything you have," she continued. "Every document, every piece of information. The more we have, the better we can understand what's going on. But you need to stay calm. I know this is personal, but you have to act like nothing is wrong. If Lauren and Graham suspect anything, they'll cover their tracks. You need to keep up the act. Pretend everything is normal. That's the only way we can get ahead of them." The weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Pretend everything was normal? How could I? The betrayal I had uncovered was too deep, too damaging. My whole world felt like it was crumbling around me, and yet I was supposed to act like nothing had changed? I didn't know if I could do it. But I had no choice. Agent Carter was right. If I tipped Lauren off, if I let on that I knew something was wrong, it could all fall apart. They could cover their tracks, erase the evidence, and I'd be left with nothing. I took a deep breath and nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes. But I need to know what happens next. How do we proceed?" She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms across her chest. "We start by tracking Lauren and Graham. We'll use surveillance, financial tracing, and any other means we can legally employ. We'll need to be thorough. But don't worry. We'll stay one step ahead." I felt a slight sense of relief knowing that Agent Carter and the FBI were now involved. For the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. There were professionals who knew what they were doing, people who could take the burden off my shoulders and put the pressure back on Lauren and her accomplices. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the fear that gnawed at me. I wasn't just fighting for a divorce anymore. I was fighting for my life, my future, and everything I had worked so hard to build. The stakes had never been higher, and I wasn't sure how this would all end. As Agent Carter and I continued to plan, I couldn't help but think about Lauren. How had she gotten so deep into this? How had she hidden it from me for so long? I had always thought we were partners, that we could face anything together. But now it seemed like she had been playing me from the start, using me as a pawn in a much larger game. I couldn't understand how she had managed to keep up the facade for so long. She was so careful, so calculating. But now the truth was coming to light. It was only a matter of time before the FBI cracked the case wide open. But I had to remain patient. I had to stay calm. I had to trust Agent Carter and her team. A few days later, things started to move quickly. Agent Carter contacted me with an update. "We've got a lead on Graham," she said. "He's been connected to some shady real estate dealings in the past, and we've traced some of the funds you uncovered to an offshore account. It's bigger than we thought, Justin. This isn't just a personal betrayal. This is part of a much larger criminal network." My heart sank as the weight of her words hit me. What had I gotten myself into? The scope of this situation was far beyond anything I had imagined. This wasn't just about me, about Lauren, or about Graham. This was about an entire network of criminals, people who were using our lives as pawns in their games. The more I learned, the more it felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies, deceit, and betrayal. But I couldn't back down. I couldn't let them win. I had to see this through to the end. The operation moved faster than I expected. Agent Carter and her team had been working behind the scenes, tracking Lauren, Graham, and the people connected to their criminal network. I had to maintain my composure, pretending everything was normal at home, but each day felt like an unbearable weight. The suspense was eating me alive, but I knew that if I gave any indication that I knew what was really happening, it could all fall apart. Then it happened. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk, I received a call from Agent Carter. "It's time," she said, her voice steady but serious. "We have enough. We're making arrests today. Lauren will be taken into custody." My heart pounded in my chest as I listened. The magnitude of it all was almost too much to process. Lauren, the woman I had loved for over 2 decades, was now part of a federal investigation. She was being arrested for financial crimes for her role in a sprawling criminal scheme. Everything we had built, everything we had shared, was now a lie, a carefully orchestrated deception. Agent Carter continued, "We've got Graham and 2 of his associates. They'll be arrested today as well. We've got the documents, the offshore accounts, everything. This network is bigger than we thought, Justin. It's connected to a series of fraudulent divorces, fake marriages, and predatory business deals." I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. The truth was finally coming out, but at the cost of everything I had known. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to feel vindicated or devastated. As much as I wanted to confront Lauren, to look her in the eyes and demand answers, I knew it wasn't the time. I had to let the FBI do their work. The next day, I received another call. This time, it was from a local law enforcement officer. "We've arrested Lauren," he said. "She's been taken into custody. She's agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. The whole operation is crumbling, Justin. Everything you've uncovered is true. It was over." In one swift, calculated move, Lauren's world had come crashing down. The woman who had spent months, maybe even years, building an empire of lies was now facing the consequences. But there was a bitter taste in my mouth. As relieved as I was that the investigation was complete, part of me still couldn't accept the reality of it all. How had she gotten so deep into this? How had she betrayed me, our family, and everything we had worked for? But there was no time to dwell on the whys anymore. The network that Lauren had been part of was vast. As the FBI made arrests and exposed the criminal activities, it became clear that this wasn't just a personal betrayal. This was a systemic issue, one that had affected countless people. Lauren and Graham were just 2 pieces of a much larger puzzle. The investigation was far from over, and I knew I had a role to play in bringing down the rest of the operation. It was clear now, Lauren wasn't just a victim of temptation. She was a willing participant in something far more dangerous. A year had passed since Lauren's arrest, and the aftermath of everything that had unfolded still haunted me. I had spent months in a haze, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions that came with discovering the truth. The betrayal, the lies, the financial devastation. It all felt like it had happened to someone else, not to me. But slowly I started rebuilding. I began the long, painful process of reclaiming my life, step by step. In the months that followed, I focused on what really mattered: my work, my health, and the relationships I had neglected over the years. The divorce was finalized without much drama. Lauren agreed to the terms, knowing that the evidence against her was overwhelming. I didn't fight her for anything more than what I felt was fair. The financial damage was done, but I had my integrity, and that was something money couldn't take away. I threw myself into my work, but I also spent more time with the people who truly mattered. My family, my friends, the ones who had supported me throughout everything. They helped me remember who I was, who I had been before all this darkness crept into my life. One evening, as I stood on the terrace of my yacht club, watching the waves crash against the shore, I realized that everything had changed. The life I had known was gone, and in its place was something new, something stronger, something that wasn't built on lies or manipulation. I had learned valuable lessons throughout the past year. One of the most important being that I couldn't rely on anyone else to define my worth. Not Lauren, not Graham, not anyone else who had used me for their own gain. I was in control of my own destiny now. My mother, Sylvia, had stepped in to help manage the family business during the darkest times, and together, we launched a program to support victims of financial crimes. The program was a way for me to give back, to help others who had been in the same position I had found myself in. People who had trusted the wrong people, who had been taken advantage of by those they loved. The club, which had once been a place for relaxation, became a place of healing. We offered workshops, seminars, and support groups for people who had been financially, emotionally, or psychologically harmed by fraud, scams, and betrayal. It became a community for those who had lost faith but were determined to rebuild their lives. Even the FBI had taken notice of the work we were doing. They partnered with us for training initiatives, using our resources to educate people on how to spot financial crimes before it was too late. As I watched the sunset from the terrace, I felt a deep sense of peace. The pain of the past was still there, like a scar that would never fully heal. But I had learned to live with it. I had learned to use it as fuel for something better, something more meaningful. Betrayal had destroyed my old life, but it had given me a new one. One that was honest, one that was built on real relationships and real purpose. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally free.